View from the outside of the massive corporate headquarters is quite impressive, but for our dumb boy named Fujita, the view from the inside is much less spectacular. He finds himself standing before his boss, a man who seems to have perfected the art of being loud and unreasonable at the same time. The boss waves a stack of papers in the air, loudly wondering how such an easy task could be handled so poorly. Fujita stands there in silence, certain that he followed every instruction to the letter, yet he knows that in this office, being right is less important than being quiet. He offers a sincere apology just to make the shouting stop, though he realizes that his voice was never really welcome in the first place. As he returns to his desk under the heavy gaze of his manager, Fujita reflects on his career choices. He initially thought he had landed a dream job with excellent benefits and the rare perk of company-provided housing. Now he realizes that he has simply signed up to spend 24 hours a day with people who seem to enjoy making his life difficult. His coworkers watch the scene with amusement rather than sympathy, leaving Fujita to feel like he is the only person in the building who understands the meaning of hard work. Even his precious day off offers no escape from the corporate grind. The company is holding a mandatory barbecue, which sounds like a fun social event until one realizes that Fujita is the only person actually doing any work. While his coworkers lounge at the tables and enjoy cold drinks, he is stuck behind a sizzling grill, sweating over a pile of meat. One of the younger women approaches him with a sussy look, teasing him about his reputation and making him feel even more awkward than usual. He can hear the others talking about him as if he is not standing right there, making comments about his personality and what he might be like outside of the office. The mood of the afternoon changes when the boss arrives in a loud Hawaiian shirt, already several drinks into his holiday. He immediately begins shouting for more food and drink, acting as though the park is just another extension of his office. Just as Fujita is about to lose his patience, a woman appears who seems to have stepped out of a different world entirely. She is graceful and kind, approaching the table to suggest that the boss has probably had enough to drink for one afternoon. Fujita is completely mesmerized, wondering if he is actually looking at a goddess who has descended into this chaotic park just to bring a bit of peace. The enchantment is broken when the boss turns to the woman and begins to insult her with the same rudeness he uses on his staff. It turns out that this stunning woman is actually his wife, a realization that leaves Fujita in a state of total shock. He listens in disbelief as the boss calls her a nag and makes incredibly rude comments about how women lose their value as they get older. Fujita finds himself clenching his fists, unable to comprehend how a man so unpleasant could be married to someone so wonderful. He wants to speak up and tell the woman how beautiful she is, but he remains frozen in place as the boss continues his loud, drunken rant. The other coworkers seem to find the whole display quite normal, even going as far as to comment on what a great and loving couple they make. Fujita can only watch in silence, his frustration growing as he sees the wife patiently endure her husband's behavior. Eventually, the boss reaches his limit and passes out right at the table, leaving his wife to figure out how to get him home. She looks exhausted and apologetic, trying to wake him up without any success. Seeing her struggle, Fujita finally finds his courage and steps in to help. He realizes that carrying his boss back to the company housing is going to be the most difficult task of his entire career. As he heaves the sleeping man over his shoulder, he is surprised by just how heavy a person can be when they are made entirely of bad attitude and expensive steak. He spends the rest of his evening lugging the boss through the park and up to the apartment, fueled only by the desire to be helpful to the woman he admires. After a long and sweaty journey, they finally reach the bedroom, and Fujita rolls the boss onto the mattress. The man immediately begins to snore, blissfully unaware of the trouble he has caused. The wife bows deeply and thanks Fujita for his kindness, her voice full of genuine gratitude. Fujita tries to maintain a brave face after his long journey, offering a confident thumbs up and insisting that he is perfectly fine, despite being clearly exhausted. Miki is not convinced by his act and reaches out with a soft cloth to gently wipe the sweat from his forehead. This small gesture of kindness makes Fujita's heart race, and he finds himself staring at her in a daze while realizing that she is far too stunning to be married to a man like his boss. He feels like a complete outsider in her world, convinced that he means absolutely nothing to her beyond being a helpful employee. Hoping to escape the awkwardness of his own thoughts, Fujita turns to leave the room in a hurry, but his coordination fails him at the worst possible moment. He stumbles and bumps right into Miki, causing both of them to lose their balance and tumble onto the floor in a tangled heap. In a classic moment of terrible luck, he ends up pinned directly over her, and the sudden silence in the room is broken only by the sound of the boss snoring nearby. Fujita is mortified and immediately begins to apologize for his clumsiness, wishing he could simply vanish into the floorboards to avoid the embarrassment. Miki does not seem angry at all, and instead takes the opportunity to tease him about the situation. She points out that for a second, it looked like he was leaning in to give her a sussy gesture. She playfully wonders if he would be upset if such a thing actually happened, which sends Fujita into a state of total panic. He is completely overwhelmed by her beauty and her playful nature, reaffirming his belief that she deserves someone much better than his manager. As she reaches toward his face, Fujita is certain the big moment has finally arrived, and he braces himself for a cardio gesture. However, the reality of the situation is much less dramatic than his imagination. Instead of a sussy gesture, Miki simply pulls a stray leaf out of his hair that must have stuck to him during the barbecue in the park. She shows him the tiny piece of nature with a kind smile, leaving Fujita to feel like a total fool for letting his thoughts run wild. He laughs nervously and blushes a deep shade of red, realizing that he completely misread the moment and is probably acting like a complete idiot in front of the woman he admires. Little does Fujita know that they are not as alone as they think. The younger coworker from the barbecue has followed them into the hallway and is watching the entire interaction through the crack of the door. She has her phone out and is recording the scene with a sussy grin, thinking that Fujita is being surprisingly bold with the boss's wife. Fujita finds himself sitting in a comfortable living room, wondering exactly how his life led him to this specific sofa on what was supposed to be a quiet evening. Just as he is contemplating his confusing situation, the younger woman from the barbecue enters the room with a tray of cold drinks. She casually mentions that her husband has just left for a business trip, leaving her all alone in the apartment for the time being. Fujita is already well aware of this fact because her husband is his coworker, Toyoshima, who spent most of the previous day bragging about his important international travel plans and complaining about how much responsibility he carries compared to the newer employees. The atmosphere in the room takes a sharp turn when the woman sits down and pulls out her phone with a sussy glint in her eyes. She reveals that she saw everything that happened between him and Miki earlier and even managed to capture a very misleading photo of their accidental tumble on the floor. Fujita is hit with a wave of pure dread as he looks at the image on the screen, realizing it looks far more scandalous than the simple act of removing a leaf from his hair. He desperately tries to explain that the whole thing is just a massive misunderstanding and pleads with her to delete the evidence before anyone else has a chance to see it. Instead of being helpful, the woman leans in with a playful smile and reveals that she has actually been interested in Fujita for quite some time. She suggests that she might be willing to get rid of the compromising photo if he agrees to stay and keep her company while her husband is away. Fujita is absolutely stunned by the sussy suggestion, realizing that she is suggesting something entirely sussy for a married woman. He tries to stand his ground and points out that her husband is his colleague, but his resolve quickly weakens when she threatens to send the photo directly to the boss if he refuses to cooperate. The thought of the boss seeing that picture sends a chill down Fujita's spine, as he can practically hear the inevitable shouting and feel the immediate loss of his career. Even worse than losing his job, he knows that Miki would be caught in the middle of the fallout, and he cannot bear the thought of her reputation being ruined because of his clumsiness. Feeling completely trapped by the situation, Fujita eventually realizes he has no choice but to negotiate. He asks for a firm promise that the photo will be deleted once and for all if he stays. The woman gives him her word that their secret will be safe with her. Then they started an intense cardio session. Fujita trudges home after another grueling day at the office, feeling like the weight of the entire corporate world is resting on his shoulders. He cannot help but think back to earlier that day when his coworker Toyoshima called him from a sunny beach to brag about his important business trip abroad. While Toyoshima enjoyed the ocean breeze and expensive sunglasses, he shamelessly dumped all of his urgent meeting materials onto Fujita's desk. This blatant display of laziness has left Fujita completely drained, but his mood takes a sudden and dramatic turn for the better when he happens to run into Miki on his way home. Just seeing her kind face and warm smile makes him feel like he has been given a second wind, and he finds himself complimenting her grace with a level of confidence he usually only dreams of having. However, his brief moment of peace is shattered when the situation takes a chaotic and unexpected turn. Moena, the sussy wife of his lazy coworker, appears out of nowhere and latches onto his arm with a grip that suggests she has no intention of letting go. She drags him away in a flurry of excitement, leaving poor Miki standing on the sidewalk in a state of total confusion. Fujita is in a complete state of panic as they enter the apartment, realizing that he has once again been pulled into Moena's unpredictable world. He tries his best to maintain his composure, but he knows that being alone with someone so determined to cause trouble is a recipe for disaster. Once they are inside the room, Moena wastes no time getting down to business and brings up the sussy photo from the barbecue once again. She holds it over his head like a dark cloud, reminding him that if the boss ever sees the image, it will not just be Fujita who loses his job. She points out that Miki's reputation would also be completely ruined, which is a thought that Fujita simply cannot handle. He stands there in a cold sweat, paralyzed by the realization that his clumsy accident has given Moena the perfect leverage to keep him trapped. He tries to protest and explain that he cannot possibly go along with her bold suggestions, but his words fail him as she continues to press the issue with a playful and relentless intensity. The pressure continues to mount as Moena moves even closer, making it very clear that she is in total control of the situation. Fujita feels like a deer caught in the headlights, his heart thumping wildly against his ribs as he tries to find a way out of this impossible dilemma. He realizes that Moena is much more cunning than he originally thought. Fujita lets out a long and weary sigh as he finally finishes his work for the day, only to be interrupted by the loud and overly confident Toyoshima. His coworker is fresh back from his business trip and is busy bragging about how much the client loved him, completely unaware that Fujita spent that time getting very well acquainted with his wife back home. The situation becomes even more awkward when their boss joins the conversation to remind Fujita that he should be more like the successful Toyoshima and focus on being productive instead of wasting everyone's time. The two older men share a laugh and start making loud plans to visit the local red light district for the night, leaving Fujita to watch them walk away while feeling a strange mixture of pity and annoyance. As he begins his quiet walk home under the stars, Fujita cannot help but reflect on how frequently his boss visits such questionable places and realizes that the man is a total hypocrite. His thoughts are interrupted when he spots a graceful figure ahead of him and realizes that he has run into Miki, the very woman he was just thinking about. He is once again struck by her incredible beauty and finds it impossible to understand why a man would choose to spend his time and money in a brothel when he has someone so wonderful waiting for him at home. They end up walking toward their apartment building together, and Miki mentions that she is surprised to see him heading home so early instead of joining the rest of the office crew. Fujita explains that he was not really invited to the party and honestly has no interest in those kinds of places anyway, which seems to catch her off guard. The conversation takes a serious turn when Miki admits that she is fully aware of her husband's late-night habits, but chooses to view them as a necessary part of his work, socializing rather than true betrayal. Despite her calm and logical explanation, Fujita can see a deep sadness in her eyes that suggests she is simply trying to convince herself that she is not actually hurt by the behavior. He then notices that her shirt collar is tucked in awkwardly and reaches out to fix it for her. But his simple gesture of kindness causes her to jump and let out a startled sound. She suddenly seems to lose all the strength in her legs and begins to stumble, forcing Fujita to reach out and catch her before she hits the pavement. He becomes genuinely concerned that she might be falling ill from the heat and wonders if he should call for medical help, but she insists that she is perfectly fine despite her visible trembling. They eventually make it back to the quiet safety of the living room, where they sit together on the sofa to catch their breath. Miki looks down at her hands and confesses that she has always considered herself to be a rather cold and distant person, yet she cannot explain why her body is reacting so sussy to his presence. Before he can find the right way to respond to her confession, she reaches out and takes his hand in hers with a firm and desperate grip. She tells him that she has a very important cardio favor to ask of him. Then they really started a cardio session. Fujita decides that it is probably best for his heart and his career if he makes a very quick exit from the apartment, realizing that the situation on the sofa was becoming much more sussy than he was prepared to handle. He leaves Miki sitting there in a bit of a daze and practically dashes through the doorway, leaning against the wall outside while trying to catch his breath and acknowledging that he was dangerously close to crossing a line he could never come back from. Even when he returns to the office the next day, he cannot help but marvel at how someone as wonderful as Miki ended up with a boss who seems to have been born with a permanent frown and a terrible personality. The universe clearly has a sense of humor, because the boss chooses that exact moment to stomp into the room and demand that Fujita get out of his way, acting like the simple act of standing by a printer is a major corporate offense. Fujita tries to make some awkward small talk about the man's evening plans, and realizes that his manager is definitely planning another night out on the town, which only makes Fujita feel even more sympathy for the woman waiting at home. As he heads back to his own apartment later that evening, he is surprised to find a small pink bag and a handwritten note hanging from his door handle, inviting him over for a proper thank you dinner for everything he did the previous day. The sight of the dining table leaves Fujita wondering if he accidentally walked into a professional banquet because Miki has prepared an incredible amount of delicious food just for him. He happily spends the evening enjoying the best meal of his life, while Miki watches him with a look of genuine happiness that makes the entire room feel warm and inviting. To show his appreciation, Fujita insists on helping with the dishes afterward, but his focus is completely derailed when Miki approaches him and does a sussy action. The walk home after such a surprise is a confusing experience for him as he tries to reconcile Miki's kindness with the complicated nature of her marriage. He finds himself pacing through the hallways of the building with a racing heart, only to stop in his tracks when he spots a graceful woman in a stunning white outfit standing nearby. He realizes with a start that he is looking at Miki once again, though she looks even more elegant and mysterious than before. Fujita continues his role as a gentleman by walking Miki through the hallways, only to be puzzled when she stops in front of an apartment that definitely does not belong to her. He stands there wondering why she would be standing in front of someone else's door, especially while looking so troubled. Despite his better judgment and a general sense that he is probably entering a world of trouble, he finds himself accepting her invitation to come inside after she reassures him that her husband is safely away on a business dinner and will not be home for a long time. They settle in with a bit of wine and some light snacks, and Fujita tries his absolute best to focus on anything other than how stunning she looks in her casual dress. His brain is definitely struggling to maintain a professional mindset as he stares into his glass, realizing that this is not exactly the typical way an employee spends an evening with their boss's wife. The atmosphere grows heavy as Miki drops a major truth bomb, revealing that she is fully aware her husband is being unfaithful with a specific woman from the accounting department. Fujita is hit with a wave of realization as she explains that she literally saw the two of them enter that very apartment together just moments before, while her husband was busy lying about having a professional meeting. The ridiculousness of the situation is not lost on Miki, who takes a long sip of her drink and wonders aloud how she ended up in this position. Fujita is left wondering why on earth anyone would endure such terrible treatment from a man who clearly does not appreciate her, but the answer turns out to be a classic tale of financial obligation. He learns the tragic backstory of how her parents fell into massive debt after their company went bankrupt, creating a situation where her husband stepped in to save the family from ruin. This act of financial rescue has left Miki feeling like she has no choice but to overlook his bad behavior, trapped by a massive sense of gratitude that effectively prevents her from ever seeking a divorce. Fujita is overwhelmed by her strength and courage, feeling a surge of protective anger toward his manager, while realizing just how much she has been suffering in silence. As she thanks him for finally being the one person she could open up to, the emotional weight of the night becomes far too much to handle. Fujita spends his evening sitting alone in his room and drowning his sorrows, while wondering what on earth he was thinking by letting his emotions get the better of him. He feels completely defeated and convinced that he was doomed to fail from the very beginning, because a rejection was always the most likely outcome for someone in his position. The next day at the office offers no relief as he types away at his desk while watching his boss and Toyoshima share another laugh across the room. His mood sinks even lower when the boss catches him staring and decides to walk over for a quick round of professional bullying. The manager leans in close to remind him that he is essentially the department scapegoat and that the only reason he is even kept around is to provide the higher-ups with a convenient way to relieve their own stress. Fujita tries to endure the insults in silence, though he cannot help but feel the crushing unfairness of being the hardest worker in a building where he is treated like he means nothing at all. By the time he trudges back to the company housing later that night, he feels like he has reached his absolute breaking point and simply wants to disappear into his apartment. However, he is stopped in his tracks when he finds Moena waiting for him right outside his door, looking very comfortable in her casual dress. She offers a cheerful welcome and suggests that he keep her company for a while since her husband is going to be home late once again. Fujita tries to stand his ground by explaining that he is far too exhausted from the workday to host guests. Moena is not interested in his excuses and insists that he is the resilient type who will be just fine. The weight of the day finally causes him to snap, and he finds himself venting his frustrations about how his life is a total mess and how he is actually not fine at all. He pours out his heart about being rejected by the person he admires and being treated like garbage by his superiors, while Moena listens with a calm and curious expression. After hearing his outburst, she gives him a playful look and tells him that she knows exactly what he needs to feel better. Fujita can only watch in total confusion as she prepares to take charge of the situation. Fujita is trudging along on his way home when he spots a very unlikely trio standing together like a scene from a complicated soap opera. Moena is there with her usual high energy, standing right next to Miki and the very woman from accounting who has been causing so much trouble for Miki's marriage. He tries to pull a classic stealth maneuver and walk past without being noticed, but Moena has the eyes of a hawk and waves him over with a bright greeting. The air is so thick with tension that he could probably cut it with his briefcase, especially since Miki is looking at the ground with a face full of sorrow. Moena decides that the best way to handle a sensitive situation is to announce to the entire group that poor Fujita has recently suffered a major heartbreak. He feels his face turning a bright shade of red while he desperately tries to insist that everything is perfectly fine and that he has simply decided to give up on his unrequited feelings. As he makes a hasty escape, he does not see the lingering and pained look that Miki sends in his direction, as if her own heart is breaking right along with his. Life back at the office has moved from being merely difficult to becoming a total comedy of errors, where he is the only one not laughing. His manager and Toyoshima have formed a two-man fan club dedicated to making his life miserable, and they spend their time mocking his recent lack of energy while whispering about how full of himself he has become. The manager eventually decides that Fujita's specialized skills are best used making physical copies of a massive stack of files that are already stored digitally on every computer in the mind building. It is a blatant display of workplace bullying, designed to take away any sense of meaning from his day, and he finally realizes that he is nothing more than a convenient scapegoat for the entire department. He stares at the copy machine and acknowledges the cold reality that no one at this company actually needs him or appreciates the hard work he puts in every single day. Later that evening, he is walking home looking so pale and exhausted that he might be mistaken for a wandering spirit. He happens to cross paths with Miki again and tries to keep things brief with a polite greeting before moving on, but she reaches out and stops him in his tracks by grabbing his sleeve. She is genuinely worried about his well-being because he looks like he is about to collapse, and she wonders if something terrible has happened since they last spoke. Fujita finally decides to speak his truth and tells her that he is planning on quitting the company very soon because he simply cannot take the constant abuse anymore. He tries to tell her that she should not waste her concern on someone as insignificant as him, but the look of absolute shock and sadness on her face suggests that his departure will leave a much larger hole in her world than he ever imagined. Back at the office, the boss is busy playing the part of the ultimate corporate suck-up to a high-ranking executive. Fujita watches from afar with a new sense of determination, recalling the bold promise he made to Miki about finally surpassing his manager's career. However, reality sets in quickly as he is once again assigned the most meaningless tasks imaginable. He finds himself standing over the copier for hours, realizing that he has become the department's designated scapegoat, while his coworkers handle the actual business and share a laugh at his expense. He feels the weight of the company on his shoulders, realizing that at this office, he is basically the human equivalent of a paperweight that everyone likes to complain about. That evening, Fujita finds himself sharing a quiet drink with Miki once again. He tells her about a new company contest for an advertising project involving health drinks for women, and mentions how much it would mean to be chosen as the project leader. Miki notes that she actually uses those products herself, and Fujita realizes that her perspective is exactly what he needs to create a winning idea. He is incredibly grateful when she offers to organize a little gathering with the other women in the office to gather even more feedback for his research. He feels a surge of genuine admiration, convinced that she truly is a goddess for being so supportive of his professional goals. The cozy atmosphere takes a sudden turn when a glass of wine accidentally tips over, soaking Miki's outfit in an instant. Fujita is mortified and immediately begins helping her clean up the mess, while offering sincere apologies for the clumsy accident. Since she can hardly walk home in wet clothes, he suggests that she stay while her things are in the laundry. He lends her a set of his own clothes to wear, trying to remain a perfect gentleman while the washing machine thumps away in the background. He reflects on how well he has handled himself so far, feeling proud of his ability to stay professional under such strange circumstances. When Miki finally steps back into the room, Fujita feels like his heart might actually skip a beat. She is wearing his oversized t-shirt, and she shyly admits that his pants were far too baggy to actually stay on her waist. Seeing her look so sussy in his own clothes is almost more than Fujita can handle. He realizes that his self-cardio control is hanging by a very thin thread as he stares at the floor to avoid becoming completely overwhelmed. Fujita is back at his desk the next day, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a renewed sense of purpose. While his screen is filled with spreadsheets and ad copy, his mind is still drifting back to the previous evening and how incredibly sussy Miki looked in his oversized clothes. His moment of quiet reflection is rudely interrupted when the usual suspects loom over his shoulder like a pair of corporate vultures. The boss and Toyoshima have caught wind of his entry into the company contest and are practically tripping over themselves to mock his ambition. The manager goes as far as to crumple Fujita's paperwork into a ball, laughing that he is a complete waste of the world's resources just for sitting there. Even Toyoshima joins in, smugly announcing that he is entering the contest as well and that Fujita is officially out of luck. Despite the public humiliation, Fujita finds a hidden source of strength that his superiors know nothing about. He clenches his fist and realizes that he has no intention of giving up because he has a secret advantage that none of them can match. He feels a quiet sense of triumph knowing that while they may have the titles, he has the support of all their wives on his side. This confidence carries him to the special gathering Miki organized, where he finds himself in a room full of the company's most influential spouses. He is officially introduced to the group, including the no-nonsense Mrs. Shirakawa and the quiet Mrs. Okui, who has brought her young son along. As Fujita tries to conduct his research on the women's health drink, he quickly realizes that professional feedback can be a bit of a contact sport. Mrs. Shirakawa is particularly intimidating, crossing her legs and demanding to know if he actually has a plan or if he is just gathering data without any direction. She bluntly asks if he is there to play games, which causes Fujita to nearly jump out of his skin with fear. He realizes that she is just as terrifying as her husband in the planning department, and he finds himself stammering out apologies. Fortunately, Miki acts as his guardian angel once again, gently calming her friend down and pointing out that a rough idea is a perfectly fine place to start. With the tension broken, the women share their honest thoughts on everything from the drink's taste to its skincare benefits. Fujita scribbles notes as fast as he can, feeling deeply moved by how much Miki is willing to help him succeed. When the meeting finally wraps up and the group begins to disperse, he watches Miki leave while thinking to himself that she is truly a goddess. He is just about to head home with his valuable research when Moena appears out of nowhere with a playful glint in her eye. She insists that he follow her for a moment, and before he can even think of an excuse, he finds himself standing in front of Toyoshima's apartment door. Once they are inside, Fujita's patience finally reaches its limit as he realizes he is being pulled into another unpredictable situation. He wonders why she always seems to choose the most chaotic moments to corner him, and asks why she continues to behave this way. His frustration does little to stop her, as she moves in and does a sussy cardio action.